Thanks for having me. Well, it's Sunday night, just before the markets open on Monday. I don't think this is a coincidence. We've seen this pattern before with the president. Usually towards the end of the week, before the weekend, we hear threats of potentially more escalation, more attacks. And then if the Iranians don't budge, which they didn't, then by Sunday night, usually sometimes Sunday, comes this sort of backing off and moving towards the deal, which will hopefully impact the market positively. That's one side of this. Then also the other one, big picture, looking at the big picture and also my view here in Washington, this war has been very unpopular in the US. I mean, every poll has shown that the war was popular from the beginning until now. Just last week, latest poll showed majority of Americans want the war to end now. So the president, the U.S. president, is continuing something that's unpopular, that's not winnable, and the Iranians have actually gotten more aggressive. They're now trying to escalate even before being attacked in some episodes, and really trying to assert, as Osama, your reporter, also was just pointing out, they're trying to assert their dominance over their main leverage area, which is the Strait of Hormuz. And I think what this war really taught the Iranians, or their takeaway, has been that every time they back off, President Trump is just going to move forward. If they don't back up and potentially even escalate, then President Trump will back off. And so this, I think, seems to be Iran's new doctrine, which has started from the beginning of this war, but it's also escalated more and more. And they're just causing more damage to the U.S. assets, and really escalating also across the region.
Negar, to your point, oil prices in the Far East have opened sharply down, and we've got indices there trading to the upside. So, to your point, essentially here as well. But if there is to be a deal, what do you think it's going to look like? And how much would it be really going back to the status quo ante? Because people said there's no way that they're going to go back to that, and this war's been pointless as a result.
Well, the Iranians have been complaining from the beginning that the U.S. signed a piece of paper, the Memorandum of Understanding, signed by two presidents, which was very historic, by the way. This wasn't even done under President Obama. The president signed that Memorandum of Understanding, but then the U.S. started violating it from day one. I mean, Israel continued the conflict in Lebanon. That's a violation of point 1 of the MOU, which is ending the war. The U.S. violated the Strait of Hormuz because the Iranians said, okay, we'll open it, but it has to be with coordination, quote unquote, safe passage. And the U.S. tried to force open its own lane from the Omani side. And then also Iran's frozen assets, which were supposed to be unblocked, and the Iranians didn't get access to them. So they've had multiple complaints. But what they seem to be signaling is that the door to diplomacy wasn't closed all this time, and they're willing to go back to the MOU as long as the U.S. abides by it. Maybe they can go back to the full MOU, or at least some parts of the MOU, and slowly start discussing the violations, the grievances, how each side is understanding this Memorandum of Understanding or misunderstanding the terms of the MOU, which are very complicated but don't include a lot of details. But I think moving forward, essentially, the Iranians are showing that if the U.S. escalates, they're willing to escalate even more, and they're not going to back off unless this goes back to the diplomatic table, to negotiations, and potentially to the MOU, at least as a good starting point.
So, I mean, coercion seems to be the American policy. We don't have a strategic aim, really, which has been delineated properly, apart from the denuclearization issue. But Iran's strategic gains or goals seem to be relatively clear.
Absolutely. So the U.S. came into this with almost no strategy. Sometimes it's, the Iranians are so confused because it just seems like in a matter of days, if not hours, sometimes even the rhetoric changes, the position changes. And this is, from the U.S. president, from the commander in chief, the top person in power. So it's made the process very confusing. And really, the U.S. has shown that there has been no strategy in this war. Case in point, that they haven't been able to achieve any of the goals that they stated from the beginning. On the Iranian side, however, Iran is the underdog, so they came into this war, I think, for survival with a lot of strategy. They have the advantage of geography. Also, they're the home team. Essentially, they're defending their homeland. and they have been able to escalate in an asymmetric way horizontally and use all these other fronts and allies, open new fronts in the war and use them in a strategic way. So they're playing the long game. They've been waiting for this day. They've been expecting this attack from the US, especially from the Trump administration, for a while. And they've been preparing for it. They've had strategy laid out. And I think that strategy is still unfolding. And they're even learning more and more in the course of the war as they are fighting it, as they're making their attacks more precise, making the damage to the U.S. side more precise and more lethal, and it's just going to continue from the Iranian side.
Negar, thank you so much. Negar Mortazavi, a senior fellow at the Center for International Policy and the host of the Iran podcast, joining us there from Washington.